Hello everyone, I'm Jordana Van of Ravenlight Holistic Healing and welcome to Unicorn as a Totem. Before we get started, a quick public service announcement. It used to be that when you subscribe to my channel, as many of you have, and you are awesome and I adore you, that this was enough to guarantee that you would be notified when I put out a new video. But apparently you now not only have to subscribe, you have to click the little bell icon next to the subscribe button, and that will allow you to receive notifications. After that, you then have to select whether or not you want to receive notifications every time I post a new video, or if you want YouTube to decide which videos you would like to be notified about. If you don't select an option yourself, YouTube will default to picking which of my videos they think you'll want to see. So if you enjoy my work, subscribe and click the bell and click all, and you'll always know when I've uploaded something new. Okay, end of PSA. Let's get started, shall we? So, due to its nature as a mythological creature, understanding the unicorn and what it represents when it's one of our totems is really about identifying which parts of its ever-changing mythology have become accepted by us as modern-day humans. Usually when I make these videos, I spend a good month learning everything I can about the animal, after which I subject all of the factual information I've gathered to a psychological, metaphysical, and symbolic analysis. It's only after I've done that that I sit down and do an intuitive read on the subject. But since we're dealing with a mythological creature and there are no hard facts for me to study and analyze, the way we're going to build a profile of the unicorn and those that resonate with it is going to be by moving through a variety of historical periods and identifying those qualities that we continue to associate with the unicorn, even if the original reasons for the association have been lost. I'm not going to cover everything because there is just so much, but we're still going to paint a very detailed picture. And as always, if you're interested in hearing more about a creature than I discuss in a video or learning how it relates to you personally, please visit my website and schedule an animal totem spirit guide interpretation with me. I will be delighted to talk to you in further detail then. So, we're going to start with a Greek physician by the name of Ctesias, who wrote in the 5th century BC about a creature that he called the Indian ass. And just in case you weren't already aware, ass is another term for donkey. Anyway, so Ctesias, who ministered to the Persian king at his court, was a highly respected individual, so his writings were equally well respected at the time. However, while he was fascinated with India and he wrote about it at great length, he never actually visited there himself, and he's believed to have based his description of the Indian ass and all else in his book on stories he heard from travelers, along with Indian myths, legends, folk tales, and sacred writings. 2, most researchers have concluded that the Indian ass is actually a combination of 3 different creatures: the rhinoceros, the Tibetan antelope, which is also called the chiru, and the kyang, the largest of the wild asses. Now, according to Ctesias, the Indian ass had a white body, a dark red head, dark blue eyes, was as large as a horse or larger, and had a single 1.5-foot horn rising from his forehead. The base of this horn was white, the middle was black, and the upper part was crimson. If you cut off the horn and drank from it, it would make you immune to both epilepsy, which was then called the holy disease, and poison. Because the Indian ass's flesh was described as too bitter to eat, the only real reason you would want it was for the protective properties of that horn. In those days, being poisoned was actually a really big concern. People didn't understand bacterial infections or food contamination, so if you died from mysterious symptoms, it was often assumed you'd been poisoned. Needless to say, given the amount of unexplained deaths, a lot of people were concerned about being poisoned, and so that horn was highly coveted as a lifesaver. The problem for would-be horn hunters, according to Ctesias, was that the Indian ass was extremely fast and powerful, and it could only be captured when taking its young out to pasture. It would not desert its young, so it could be more easily surrounded by men and horses, lots of men and horses, as the Indian ass was a fierce fighter. It would battle its attackers with horn and teeth and heels and had to be taken down by arrows and spears. And according to Ctesias, it could not be captured alive. So how is all of this relevant to unicorn people? Well, let's start with that horn, which is supposed to keep you from being poisoned and therefore can literally save your life. The Indian ass, which I'm just going to start calling the unicorn at this point, has flesh which is too bitter to eat, so people only want it for the horn. In this day and age, when we talk about being poisoned, a word that comes up often in conversation, we tend to be talking about toxic people, toxic relationships, or being stuck in what we perceive as toxic circumstances. Our life or the people in it are in some way poisoning us. And what do we tend to do if we feel we are being poisoned? Well, not seek the antidote in most cases. Nope, your average Joe and average Jane would rather find someone to whom they can explain exactly how they are being poisoned, how they are being victimized. Basically, their response is to find other people that they can poison in turn, and in that way, ameliorate their suffering. There's a reason why they say misery loves company. If you don't believe me, spend an hour on Facebook. So if you're a unicorn person, it's a good bet that you have that certain something that makes you really, really yummy to all those toxic people out there who just want a shoulder to whine on. We're going to talk about exactly why this is later, but for now, like the unicorn with its striking horn, it's like you're holding up a shining beacon saying, "Here, lean on me, you'll feel better." And people do tend to feel better when they get done dumping their poison all over you, but you feel half dead. And they're wanting you to hear them, heal them, nurture them, support them, tell them everything's going to be okay. They suck you dry because they don't want you. They don't really care about who you are, at least not in that moment. They want your sparkly energy. That's what matters to them. I know I'm mixing my mythologies here, but unicorn people tend to attract a lot of emotional vampires. The good news is that in Theseus's account, it takes a veritable army to get that horn, and the unicorn doesn't go down without a fight. Unicorn people attract a lot of emotional vampires, but they are still pretty hardy. 1 or 2 people dumping on them isn't going to cause them any serious harm. They really do want to help others. It's when there are 5, 10, a dozen, whole family reunions worth, that they're going to go down, and they're going to go down hard. Unicorn people tend to seem okay right up until the moment they're not. And that's when the wheels fall off the bus and it takes a good long time for them to recover. So they really need to learn how to slow down and check in with themselves every day and to be honest about what they find when they do, rather than just letting others' poisons keep accumulating until it hits the point where the toxicity knocks them flat. This is where something like a regular meditation practice comes in handy, or a daily walk, or scheduled time spent journaling. Something that takes them away from others and lets them take stock of how they truly feel. This is particularly important if you, like the majority of the unicorn people I know, have strong Aquarius or Sagittarius placements in your astrological chart. Sag can talk itself into feeling better about just about anything. So they tend to stay stuck in crummy situations longer than the rest of us. You know, all these toxic people are making me miserable, but hey, at least people want to be with me, right? Ugh. Aquarius just pretends it doesn't have feelings. Aquarians would prefer an intellectual interpretation of life, not an emotional one. So what we have here is, all these toxic people are making me miserable, but feeling things annoys me. So I'm not going to feel miserable. There, I fixed it. And meanwhile, all the anger and frustration and anxiety just keeps accumulating until they explode. So what else do we get from Theseus's account? Unicorns are fierce, loyal, and will die rather than see harm come to their family or endure captivity. You want to rile up a unicorn person? Threaten those they care about. They will take an affront to those they love quite personally, and you can bet they will be on your doorstep wanting to talk with you about it. They also cannot, will not tolerate confinement or your infringement upon their freedom. They're the commitment phobes. Here again, we find those Sagittarians and Aquarians. These folks need the freedom to think and behave independently of the control of others, and they are restless and rebellious and stubborn. If they've chosen to stay with you, it's because they truly love you, not because you've domesticated them. Now we're going to leave 5th century BC Persia for a bit and talk about the unicorn's long stay as a religious icon. I also want to remind you guys that the unicorn's association with Christ, that we're going to talk about in a minute, does not make it a uniquely Christian symbol. You can be a unicorn person and not be even remotely Christian in your beliefs. We just get to thank Christianity for some of the characteristics we now associate with the unicorn. So the story of how the unicorn got into the Bible, where it spent quite a bit of time, and how it was replaced by another creature in later editions, is a wonderfully interesting one. But it would take way too long to explain well. So we're just going to skip to the part where the unicorn acquires its status as a symbol of Christ and Christian virtues. In numerous accounts and depictions of a religious flavor, the unicorn is now portrayed as a small, delicate, goat-like creature while still being considered quite the wild little thing. And how do we get this wild thing to surrender? Present it with a well-endowed virgin. The unicorn, who apparently finds this irresistible for a number of very interesting reasons, will then help itself to said endowments, at which point the fair maiden will clasp her hand around the base of the horn, trapping it so that the hunter who has been laying in wait in the bushes beside her can murder it. So let's just get the most obvious bit out of the way here, shall we? We have the unicorn's big pointy horn, and we have the lovely virgin, and guys, I know I don't have to spell this out for you. In this case, the unicorn came to symbolize male wildness being laid low or tamed by female innocence and purity. And my dear Sagittarians, here you are again. Sagittarians, more than any other sign, are known for their fierce attachment to moral beliefs, to what they consider to be right. If you want to turn a Sag off like a light switch, do or say something that offends their sense of integrity. A relationship with a Sagittarian is not going to last long if they can't respect your ethics. Similarly, they are most strongly attracted to those that they see as being ethical in the ways that match their own beliefs. Once upon a time, and today still in some places, virginity represented holiness, purity, freedom from sin. And today, many of us are still obsessed with ideas around sin, with trying to be good people in an ascribed way. Sagittarians and unicorn people often become attracted to a person's apparent nature as a moral being, without realizing that there's something else entirely going on beneath the surface of the person. The virgin in our Capture the Unicorn story may never have had sex, and perhaps she's even too innocent for licentious thoughts, but does that make her a good human being? Well, not if you're the unicorn about to be slaughtered. So the key, if you're a Sag or a unicorn person, is to really focus on seeing the whole picture, rather than letting your attraction to someone's perceived morality blind you to who they may actually be beneath the surface. This is especially important because both Sagittarians and unicorn people are leap before they lookers. They love being in love. Romance is like crack for these guys. And when someone inspires them to heights of passion, remember the unicorn horn here again, guys, they may jump the gun and throw themselves into a commitment they may later really forget. Which is why the old adage, married in haste, regretted in leisure, is so often applied to Sagittarians. Unicorn people, if it looks too good to be true, treat it like it is and slow down. Youth, beauty, innocence, and charm are your Achilles heel. Really take the time to get to know someone before putting yourself in situations that could lead to feeling trapped or betrayed, your two biggest fears. Or in the case of you men out there, gelded. By the way, the opposite can sometimes be true. A unicorn person may have such perfectionistic ideas about their would-be lover that they can't find anyone who meets such steep criteria. Since unicorn people aren't terribly uncomfortable being alone, this isn't a disaster. But if you do find that you are longing for a permanent relationship and it's eluding you, ask yourself if your standards are unrealistic, and whether or not you can find it within yourself to let go of one or two of the qualities that you've previously perceived as must-haves. Now, to return to our virgin unicorn story, representatives of the Christian Church further compared the idea of the unicorn being captured by the virgin and slain by the hunter as representing the way that Christ was captured by the Virgin Mary's womb and then slain by the will of God. If you're not familiar with the story of Christ, or at least not familiar with the details, the idea is that he was God's son and born to a virgin woman named Mary. At 33, he was crucified as part of God's plan to offer humans a simpler path to salvation. Once upon a time, people would sacrifice a goat or a ram or a lamb or something of that nature in order to receive God's forgiveness or favor. But after Christ's crucifixion, all people had to do was believe in Christ as the grand sacrifice, taking the place of all other sacrifices. If they did this, they would automatically be forgiven of any sins and avoid eternal damnation in hell. This is why Christ is so often referred to as the Lamb of God. Now, this is a really simplistic explanation, but it gets the point across. God sacrificed his own son so humanity would never have to sacrifice anything else in order to go to heaven, and the unicorn became a representation of that sacrifice. So let's talk about the notion of sacrifice. To sacrifice usually means to suffer oneself in order to save someone else from suffering. And as I alluded to earlier when we talked about poison, Unicorn people tend to attract sufferers in droves. A lot of this is because they don't just hold space for emotionally needy people in their lives. They take on the weight of these people's problems as though they were their own. I was actually a Bible-believing Christian for several years, many years ago, and I recall being told over and over again that one should cast one's sins upon Christ. Give Him all the weight of your sins, and then you can walk away worry-free. This is often what occurs with unicorn people. Everyone wants you to give them your love and understanding and forgiveness so they can feel better about themselves. One of my unicorn friends actually described this very well without meaning to. She was going through a rough time in her own life, and yet a whole bunch of friends and family members were needing her, and she felt like she was running a personal shelter for people with problems. She said she could not wait to close the freaking shelter so she could get some peace and quiet for herself. It might be added that during this time she manifested some really painful knee issues, a sign that she felt she was on her knees, submitting to the needs of others. The day after she finally got some time for herself, her knees ceased to trouble her. So this is a tough notion for people to swallow, but we are never intended to sacrifice our own needs for those of others. If we're meant to serve, the action will feel like joy, not sacrifice. Sacrifice and service are actually mutually exclusive. So the difference between true service, the kind that really truly helps, and sacrifice is that the latter is an ego-based act that occurs out of guilt, fear, or the desire to be appreciated and doesn't really help anyone, most especially not us. I'm not saying that we should not help others, not at all, but that real help is offered in the spirit of love and joy. We really, truly want to help, rather than helping because we believe that we have to for one reason or another. Unicorn people possess some very Virgonian aspects here. And by the way, if you know anything about astrology, you probably know that Virgo's symbol is the Virgin. Anyway, few people are harder on themselves or on others than Virgos. They often view themselves as somehow inferior and believe that the only way to make up for this is to serve and serve and serve. Two, they have very deliberate ideas about how other people should be, a reflection of their own perfectionistic standards for themselves, and often put themselves in the role of savior to those who, in their perception, can't get their lives together. These beliefs create situations where the Virgo gives and gives and gives of their time and energy, and yet winds up drained and dissatisfied and angry. Virgo never finds happiness through trying to fix others, nor in conscious acts of sacrifice. Instead, Virgo's here to learn that when it takes the actions that feel joyful and meaningful to it, and when they act only with the intention of enjoying themselves and not to save others, it not only winds up leading its happiest possible life, but it automatically winds up doing things that serve others. Service is actually Virgo's gift to the world, but it only occurs indirectly and as a result of actions that often don't look like service. So unicorn people, this relates to you because you carry within you this lovely, lovely light. Think about the way the unicorn's horn points to the heavens as though indicating a direct connection with the divine and hope. It might be added here that alicorn, the substance, or the term for the substance that came to mean unicorn horn, supposedly possessed healing properties. Christ, too, was known for his acts of healing. Your energy can do some wondrous things, but you're going to fall apart at 1,000,000 miles an hour if you consider it your duty to be a savior for everyone who needs help, or if you think that you alone can heal people. You're only going to be able to help and heal others when you focus on you and not on trying to create a specific outcome for others. This doesn't mean that you can't enjoy the hell out of acts of service. True service offered in the spirit of love feels like nothing else. But if you're doing it because you expect to create a certain result for someone and not because you actually enjoy the act itself, it's very likely going to give you a disappointing result. In other words, you can inspire others to save themselves just by being yourself, but you cannot actively save anyone. Also, the unicorn friend I just mentioned who felt like she was running a shelter, every time I spend time with her, I leave feeling like someone just charged my batteries. That's her gift as a unicorn person. But I can always tell whether or not she's been taking care of herself based on how I feel after I leave. I feel my best after seeing her when she has taken the time to make sure she's feeling her best. If you're going to be a light for a lot of other people, You have to consciously maintain your own health and happiness and charge your own darn batteries. As the saying goes, you can't pour from an empty cup. Now, during the Middle Ages, when it was still heavily associated with the Christian faith, the unicorn was adopted as a symbol by knights, largely because its supposed qualities aligned with those of chivalry, the code of honor to which knights adhered. Now, most of what we know about chivalry is heavily romanticized, but what we have come to believe matters just as much in the analysis of a totem as what is actually true. So the qualities most frequently associated with chivalry, exaggerated or not, are honor, courage, devotion, piety, courtesy, and chastity. Knights also swore to speak the truth and defend the weak, which included women at the time. Now let's compare that to some of the qualities associated with the unicorn, which were fearlessness, strength, faith, devotion, purity, innocence, and vulnerability to virgins. Despite their fierceness in battle, unicorns were also known for being gentle with maidens and with their mates. Knights were the same, expected to act with courage and brutality when needed, and yet behave with courtesy among the ladies or those weaker than themselves. Most of us, if we knew nothing of knights whatsoever and were asked to draw one, would probably draw a man in some form of armor, carrying a sword, or riding a horse and carrying a lance. That sword or lance is reminiscent of the unicorn's horn. And remember how the unicorn horn points to heaven, to God? In adopting the unicorn as their symbol, knights were effectively stating that their sword would always be used in service to God. In His name, they would be strong and fearless and act for His glory. However, that horn is also a pretty unmistakable phallic symbol, so it should make sense that in addition to being in service to God, knights in romantic tales often frequently found themselves going on some sort of mission in order to win the hand of a woman, a virgin of course, whom he loved. Or he went on a mission on behalf of what was known as courtly love, where he was in love with a woman who was already married, and the relationship was typically unconsummated. In this case, the knight himself remained virginal, or at least chaste, in that encounter. The quest was about sentiment and honor, not sex. Unicorn people learn to live in a way that represents a higher cause. If they act, it needs to be on behalf of their spiritual beliefs or on behalf of true love, which people might argue is the ultimate expression of one's spirituality. Mundane reality bores the unicorn person to tears. Their lives need to have meaning, to be larger than life. And this is where we get to talk about the quest, which featured prominently in tales of medieval knights. In these tales, the knight has to do something important, something heroic, something that sets him apart from other men. He might have to go kill a dragon, sorry dragon people, or in the case of the Crusades, reclaim the Holy Land from the infidel. He might have to engage in some feat of daring or skill, or as I just mentioned, he might win the heart of a woman by fulfilling a mission that she gives him. Having a quest gives the knight purpose, focus, and provided he succeeds, pride. Unicorn people have to have something they're striving for in order to feel whole. They need a focus, something to achieve, something to work towards, and it has to be something that aligns with their lofty moral sensibilities. These folks are not going to be satisfied setting a goal to lose 5 pounds or eat more greens or save a little money. Instead, they have to be working towards something they view as truly significant, profound, something they feel in their blood and bones. But if they themselves are not able to connect with what truly has meaning for them, they will tend instead to gravitate towards a goal they view as praiseworthy. Unicorns had a reputation as being a bit vain, and this is something with which unicorn people can also struggle. In other words, being more than a wee bit attached to how they think people see them. If they don't feel that others see them as doing important things, it can really ding their self-esteem and make them anxious. But just like the desire to serve others, if their quest doesn't come from an authentic place of joy, any action they take is likely to be wasted effort. Despite what our modern social media era has made us think, we are only truly fulfilled when we are aligned with who we are and moving from that place. Praise from others may feel great for a time, but if we're receiving it for being fakes, we are always in a state of stress because we're trying to be something we're not, and we're worried about what people will think if they find out who we really are. If you can find the guts to just be yourself, to be real, believe me guys, life gets a lot easier. Now, knights were also warriors, trained from youth to fight in battle on behalf of one's lord. And unicorn people, like the knights with whom they were so long associated, love a good fight. This might be a spirited debate, and anyone who's ever tried to argue with a Sagittarius or Aquarius knows that your chances of getting them to agree with your side are pretty much zero, or an actual situation of fighting for a cause. This might align with their quests. They might fight to change laws related to social justice or the environment, for example. They also love to fight on behalf of others. Think of our proverbial knight in shining armor who comes to someone's rescue. Unicorn people will always root for the underdog and get riled up on their behalf. But it does also mean that they can find themselves coming to the rescue of people who need to be rescued again and again and again. And so once more we return to the earlier notion of being poisoned by people who dump all over you, or endlessly sacrificing your own needs on the altar of others. Now, our romanticized stories of knights often feature a knight swearing themselves to the service of others. For some knights, swearing to defend a particular individual gave their life meaning. It was a mark of honor. Unicorn people sometimes find themselves in the same situation. You become someone's personal protector or nurturer or advocate. But if you are always riding into battle to save the same darn person, and you're starting to resent this, you are very likely wasting your time and energy. It's one thing to continue to help someone who is trying to learn to help themselves, or to battle on behalf of someone who really truly can't, like an orphan child who needs a grown-up to fight for them. But if you are constantly pulling someone out of the same darn pit that they just keep jumping into, you might want to find a worthier use for your talents. It goes back to our previous notion of service. If you're doing it from a genuine place of joy and love, well done. If you're being driven by guilt, shame, fear, or other self-destructive emotions, you're not helping anyone at the end of the day. In many ways, this is also a very Piscean situation, and for those of you familiar with the fish symbol associated with Christ, it's not a stretch to compare this to Pisces, who is pictured as two fish swimming in the opposite direction. It's often said of Pisces that they are here to serve or to suffer. They are so sensitive to the feelings of others and care so deeply about others, and they so yearn to heal the world that they find themselves endlessly giving of themselves till they have nothing left. 2, Pisces tends to be attracted to people that they perceive as being in need of help, only to find that the person never gets better and endlessly needs them. Pisces has to learn to step back and offer love and compassion without giving others a free pass to help themselves to Pisces energy anytime they please. We're also going to give a brief nod to Aries here, because Aries is the zodiac's knight in shining armor, the warrior and the champion of the underdog. One of the things I really loved about working with Unicorn is that it's one of those totems that touches on each of the astrological signs in some way or another. It is truly universal. And with that, let's talk about the unicorn of the New Age, the one we tend to see featured on greeting cards with glitters and rainbows, and on coffee mugs and t-shirts, and as children's toys, or that appear in television and movies. This unicorn most certainly does not look like a diminutive goat with an outsized horn, or like an enormous beast with a multicolored coat and horn and the manic urge to murder, but a majestic horse, usually white, sometimes black, with a pearlescent horn and a flowing mane and tail and maybe even wings. And because this is the New Age, we are going to start by talking about the fact that that unicorn's horn is rooted right in the third eye and points straight to the heavens. One of my clients said it best when she called it the unicorn's antenna. It's a direct line to the wisdom of the divine and means that the unicorn itself is a source of divine wisdom. One of the things that eternally shocks me about the unicorn friend I mentioned, who always gives my own battery a good jump start, is how she knows things about me that I have not yet realized about myself. I constantly examine what I think and feel, and I have an obsessive commitment to seeing and speaking from a place of truth. So I don't do denial. And if I catch myself moving from a place of pure ego rather than higher self, I really do make an effort to heal this as fast as possible. But this friend will catch me buying into my own ego BS long before I catch myself. It's really quite jarring, especially since I'm the one who usually does this for other people. With a few exceptions we're going to talk about in a second, unicorn people see what is true in others and in the world, but they can't always see themselves in such a clear way, usually because they've been letting all that aforementioned toxicity from others build up in their systems until they can only hear that and not their own truth. At this point, they tend to lose connection with why they feel what they feel or do what they do, and this is where some pretty interesting mood swings can happen. Something has set them off, but while they may think they know what it is, they're often wrong. And this is really simply because the junk others have been dumping on them has reached toxic levels in their own systems. Again, the way to deal with this is to make sure to take time for themselves every day to sort out what's really going on with them. So, as we talked about earlier, unicorn people have a few blind spots. When they're interested in someone romantically, or when the other person is extremely attractive, innocent seeming, or appears ethical, the unicorn person is going to have a hard time honoring their third eye when it tells them that things are not as they appear. If they see the other person as a victim or otherwise in need of saving, they are also more likely to ignore intuitive vibes telling them that they need to leave this person the heck alone, which gets them in the kind of situations where they feel drained and trapped. Lastly, if their self-esteem is feeling wobbly, they're not going to be at their intuitive best because their egos will be looking for ways to make them feel better, whether or not they truly serve their highest good. So if you're feeling insecure or any of the other aforementioned conditions are being met, don't trust your gut without giving those vibes a second look. Now, when it comes to people to whom they aren't in some way emotionally attached, or to the world at large rather than individuals, unicorn people do see pretty darn clearly. And for this reason, these folks can spend their lives in emotional pain. It hurts to watch others self-destruct and refuse to change, or to see the harm done by dictators or greedy corporations. Unicorn people ache on behalf of the aches of the world. This is why it's really so important for them to have a meaningful quest. A lot of times the only way to heal the pain they feel at seeing the world so clearly is to put in some effort to change it. Otherwise they just feel powerless and can fall into depression. So the blessing of those who are able to see clearly with their third eye is that they can see what truly is and who people truly are. But to function as this kind of person, you must also accept the divine plan and trust the universe to orchestrate things in the perfect way and time for the highest good of existence. You have to use that unicorn horn to tune into the voice of the divine and find peace in the midst of all the pain. What this feels like is a deep knowing that if you are meant to act, to change things, you will really, truly want to. You will be motivated as hell and you won't let anything stand in your way. If you're not, you won't want to help. There'll be no joy in it, even if you think there should be. In this way, you can let go of your sadness and your anger and trust the divine has everything under control, even if it looks like chaos. Guys, I've lived this, and I have made myself sick because of this several times. If you are a truth seer, you have to learn to let go. Make the changes you're called to make and learn to live in peace and patience while the universe handles the rest of the crazy. On a lighter note, you would have to be dead not to have noticed all the unicorn paraphernalia popping up these days. There are a ridiculous number of products, from alcohol to lipstick to frappuccinos to lacquer for woodworkers with the name unicorn in the title, all of which hint at magical effects. Do we really believe this? Of course not. But we're tickled by the notion. We love unicorns because the idea of them brings magic to our lives. They bring sparkles and vibrancy and joy and the whimsy of childhood. Unicorns are often pictured with fairies or princesses, and so they were the favorite fantasy of many little girls. In years long past, I would have said the boys would have been more likely to fantasize instead about being the knight in shining armor, another facet of unicorn symbolism, as we've said. But these days, who knows? If you were a boy who dreamed of visiting fairyland and meeting the fairies and being loved by your own personal unicorn, there's nothing amiss with you. So there's something wonderfully fey and otherworldly and fun and slightly mischievous about unicorn people. I've studied the fairies of Celtic mythology for most of my life, and if there's one thing we know about fairy creatures, it's that they are tricksy and can get us into trouble sometimes. Unicorn people love a good party, and they love a little risky behavior, and they will create a night on the town like no other. But you are pretty likely to wake up with a big headache and a phone full of text messages you sent when you were drunk, along with the equally inebriated photos you probably uploaded. Was it worth it? Oh, heck yes. but you're probably going to regret it just a teensy bit until you call the unicorn person and beg to do it again. Unicorn people make you feel alive, largely because they bring out the child within you who hungers for magic. And magic at its heart is just about feeling really, really good, as though we are one with all that is, that life loves us, that we are exactly where we're meant to be. We could create this experience ourselves, but we're not necessarily courageous enough or possibly inventive enough. Unicorn people have courage in spades, and they have no trouble taking risks when it comes to fun. Like the Sagittarius, whose hallmark is their relentlessly positive attitude, they are optimistic by nature and always believe that somehow everything's going to be okay. If you want someone to help you turn that frown upside down, go find a unicorn person. Now, sometimes, unicorn people, your rainbows and sunshine can drive folks crazy. If you run into someone who wants to be miserable, and our world is chock full of them, you throwing glitter on their rage or pity may really tick them off. They might accuse you of being ignorant or childish, but you really have to just take this with a grain of salt. Because you see the world and most of the people in it so clearly, you have to believe that things are supposed to turn out okay, or you're going to fall apart. And really, everything could be fine for the aforementioned misery mongers if they were willing to adopt an attitude like yours and strive for better in their lives. Unicorn people really do have the ability to inspire us to make magic in our lives. But unless they take time to reconnect to what fuels this magic, they're going to run out of sparkle very quickly, and they will tend to make themselves sick. Unicorn people absolutely must have a sense of connection with that which exists outside of our conventional understanding of reality. This is non-negotiable. These are the folks who absolutely need time in nature, communicating with the trees and the flowers and the fae, or they need to let loose on the dance floor or whatever, and let themselves surrender completely to the music and their body's secret rhythms. They may need to spend time reading a fantasy novel or playing dress-up or even engaging in pagan-style rituals and spell work. This kind of escape from the conventional understanding of reality is what recharges their batteries and allows them to keep bringing that sacred wildness and whimsy to the lives of others. The only caveat here is they can't live in that place, or they're going to be able to lose connection, or they're going to begin losing connection with reality. This is when they overspend on their credit cards without thought for the consequences, or they stay out all night even though they have to work in the morning. This is also when they're most easily suckered into trusting people who are not what they appear. Being a unicorn person requires walking a very fine line between dealing with mundane reality, which again they don't really care for, and channeling their inner child with its need for freedom and fun. And this is another reason that daily rituals such as meditating, journaling, or taking a walk where they can connect with themselves are so healthy for them. This sort of thing keeps them self-aware. Lastly, even among mythical beasts, which by their nature are elusive and rare, unicorns are basically considered an endangered species. They're always written about as being few in number and sometimes in danger of going extinct altogether. In fact, we now use the term unicorn to represent someone or something that is absolutely freaking fantastic, but is virtually impossible to find. Earlier, I mentioned that unicorns have some strong Virgonian qualities and that Virgos are known for feeling like they're somehow deficient and must make up for this lack. 2, Virgos have an innate, unrelenting drive towards perfection. No matter how awesome they are, they always feel like they should be better and tend to therefore focus on their perceived flaws rather than on their great qualities. For these reasons, no one is harder on themselves than someone with strong Virgo placements in their astrological chart. Unicorn people, too, are extremely hard on themselves and often feel like they're not good enough, and yet they are some of the rarest, loveliest souls among us. They can't see how unique and special they really are. This is why they can get so wrapped up in their physical appearance or how they believe people perceive them, because they only feel secure when they think their body or their actions look good. They don't have faith in how much people love their spirits. If you're a unicorn person and can recognize that you doubt your innate worth, not the worth you place on how you look or what you do, it's a good time to do some self-evaluation. Take some time to list your truly awesome qualities, and you'll quickly see how they outnumber your perceived flaws. You're meant to understand what a wonderful, light-filled soul you actually are, so you can stop living from a place of trying to make yourself feel sufficiently equal to others and can instead start truly celebrating being yourself and being alive. When you get how awesome you are, you begin to give yourself what you truly need in life. And this not only creates your happiest, healthiest life, but allows you to shine most brightly for others. So I hope this has given you guys a good understanding of unicorn. But as I said earlier, if you'd like further information, you're welcome to schedule a session with me. I work with people all over the world to help them understand the unique messages of their animal totems and spirit guides, and also to help with physical and emotional healing, dream interpretation, figuring out what you're here to do with yourself, and about a billion other things. And I would love to work with you as well. This is what I do for a living, and it's awesome. So if you're interested in working with me, you can visit my website, which is www.ravenlightholistichealing.com. It'll tell you exactly what I do, what to expect, what I charge, and how to book a session with me, and all that good stuff. You can also follow me and my work on Facebook and Instagram at Ravenlight Holistic Healing. But while I do understand that you might like my professional opinion on your spiritual situation, I do not provide this outside of a formal session under any circumstances. So if you're interested in my opinion or guidance, please book a session. Have a gorgeous day, my darlings. Cheers!